Hello and thank you for joining me for part one in a series of videos that I'll be putting out this week, where I break down all the fights taking place this weekend at UFC London from a betting perspective. Now I'll be covering 3 fights in this video, including the main event between Jorge Masvidal and Darren Till, and every day this week I'll be back with another 3 fights. I've got to be honest with you, around about this stage in these videos I'd usually kick things off with a big energetic intro, but I got to be honest with you, I'm feeling a little bit down today, guys. I was really down yesterday. Yesterday was one of those days where I woke up and, to be honest with you, I just couldn't wait to go back to bed again to try and sleep off the way I was feeling. And I was basically feeling really shit because of a big loss I took on the weekend. I bet a lot of money on Tim Means, and he lost, and I was absolutely gutted about it, which is really strange because over the years, I've been doing this for such a long time now. I've been doing this for well over 10 years now. And you just get used to losing. It's a big part of things, it's a big part of what we do. You get conditioned to it. And usually losses don't bother me that much. You can't let losses get to you because, if you go on tilt or you start to feel down, that can affect your judgment. So I can usually shake them off quite easily. But for whatever reason, the Tim Means loss, it hurt quite bad. And I think it was because I didn't see it coming. You know what I mean? I didn't see it coming, honestly. Like, I know on any given day, any fighter can lose. But I always tell you guys that, like, there's no such thing as being right or wrong when it comes to fighting. Like, there's no such thing as, like, one person picking one guy to win and the other person picking the other guy to win. And then whichever fighter won, this guy might have been right, this guy might have been wrong. I always say that it's not about that, because there are so many different ways that a fight can play out, and that's kind of like my mantra. Like, there's no right or wrong. It's just all about trying to identify all the different ways that a fight can play out, trying to determine which is the most likely, and then see if the odds are worth betting on that outcome. And that's kind of like my mantra. But the Tim Means loss, I think it was a brutal one, because I've been doing great this year. Since the beginning of the year, like I said, I've been absolutely crushing it. And it was the first loss in a while where I just really didn't see it coming. I barely gave Nico Price any chance of winning, to be honest with you. I gave him a puncher's chance. But then, Tim Means, before the weekend, had never been KO'd before. He had never lost a fight due to strikes. And he's had over 40 pro fights. And Nico Price isn't particularly dangerous. I know he's got a few knockout wins on his record, but they were against much lower level strikers than Tim Means. And I was just surprised that Means got caught like that. He was absolutely dominating. He was absolutely cruising. So yeah, I don't know why. I've just been feeling down ever since. So I'm going to try and pound through this video today, and I'm going to work really hard as ever. I always work hard to get back on the horse and hopefully bang out a profit this weekend on UFC London. So if you did take my advice and bet Tim Means, I'm really, really sorry. But I hope if you did watch the fight, and you look at how dominant Means was on the ground and how comfortable he was standing, I hope you at least see why, at an implied probability of around about 65%, I felt there was good value there. Because, like I say, Means was looking very, very good. I was practically counting the money already when he got knocked out. It came as a bit of a surprise. But what I also want to say, guys, is a big thank you for all the support so far on this channel. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed, and thank you for liking the videos if you've liked any of my videos. I'll do the same thing this week with the likes. We didn't quite get 50 likes on part 3 of the video last week, which means I didn't do the live stream last week, but I've already scheduled a live stream in for this Friday at 1 PM British time. So you can go onto the channel page, set a reminder for this now, and what that means is if every single video this week that I put out gets 50 likes, I will do that live stream video a couple of hours before UFC London starts, where I will answer all your questions, do a live Q&A. You ask me questions in the live chat and I'll answer every single one of you in that live stream. And I will also hunt for a decent value prop bet for every single fight taking place this weekend that hopefully you'll be able to make some money on. But enough of the talking about last week, because I've done great this year, and it's important not to focus on small shitty things. You've got to look at the overall bigger picture. And there's loads of good, interesting fights coming up this weekend, loads of opportunities to make money. But I do have quite a lot to say about the Darren Till Jorge Masvidal fight, and I've already done a bit of talking, so I'm going to try and bang through these first two fights as quickly as possible to try and keep this video as short as possible. So the first fight that I want to talk about is Dan Ige against Danny Henry. Now, Dan Ige was one of the first names that jumped out at me when I first started researching this card, because I've been really impressed with him so far in the UFC. What I really like about Dan Ige is that he's very aggressive, he's a very skilled grappler, and he just brings it. He fights at a high pace, and even when put in a really bad position, there's no quitting him. You can just tell by the way this guy fights that he is going to fight for your money every single time, and that is the exact kind of guy that I love to bet on. But unfortunately, straight off the bat, I did kind of feel that the odds were dead accurate on this fight. If we look at where they are at the moment, the odds on Ige have declined a little bit today, but at the moment you can bet him for, around about 1.67, which gives Ige an implied probability of bang on 60%. And then we compare that to Danny Henry, who has an implied probability, he's got odds of around, call it an average of 2.30, giving him an implied probability of 43%. So this is one of those fights where I do lean towards Dan Ige, and I believe that Ige should be the favourite, but I don't think his advantages are big enough to warrant being capped at having any better than a 60% chance of winning this fight, because realistically, both these guys are grapplers. Danny Henry and Ige are both grapplers, and I definitely think that Ige's the better grappler out of the two. He's definitely more dangerous, he's more technical, he trains with much better guys, but at the same time, I have noticed he does put himself in a lot of bad positions on the ground. You'll often see him chasing long shot submissions, which means he gives up position and ends up on the bottom. And also you'll see him occasionally give up top position quite easily. He doesn't have the strongest top game. Now, Danny Henry isn't as skilled of a grappler in terms of him not being as technical, but when he does get position, he tends to hold on to it. And he's a much more intelligent grappler in that sense. He understands the importance of top control and ending up in dominant position to win rounds. Whereas Ige is more of an attacking grappler, always looking for the finish, always looking to score points, which ultimately means sometimes he gives up position and loses points. So the one big weakness that I would say about Danny Henry in this fight, because I do think he can compete with Ige on the ground. They're definitely two skilled grapplers. Ige's got the slight advantage on the ground, but Henry's also much bigger, which gives him a different kind of advantage. But Henry's biggest weakness is his striking defense. He's very easy to hit. And while Dan Ige isn't the best striker, Danny Henry is quite big for the division, quite slow, doesn't use much head movement when he's striking, and for that reason he's there to be hit. He's kind of like a stationary target. So Dan Ige is very aggressive. You can see his nickname here is Dynamite. He is very aggressive, very explosive. There's a chance that he could catch Henry with something big. So the fact that he's got a slight technical advantage on the ground, and Henry is so hittable, and that I give Ige an advantage striking as well, Ige is the rightful favourite, except at an implied probability of 60%. It's a stretch to give him any better than a 60% chance of winning this fight, which means for me there's no value there. Now, what I would also say about Danny Henry in this fight is that we've also got to remember, and I'll be like a broken record all week, I'll be saying this about every fight, we've got to remember that UFC London obviously takes place in London, and Danny Henry is Scottish, which means he's got home advantage on his side. If this does end up being a close fight with loads of crazy scrambles on the ground, the judges we know in the UK are extremely biased towards British fighters. The crowd, the atmosphere in the O2 Arena is always electric. They're going to get behind Danny Henry throughout this fight. So, we know what MMA judges are like. We know they're biased. That is another risk, which makes me feel uncomfortable betting on Ige with a 60% implied probability, even though I think he'll win. And one more thing that I do like about Henry in this fight, if you were thinking of taking a gamble on him, is that he does have quite a big size advantage. I did touch on it earlier on, But at 6 foot tall, he should absolutely tower over Dan Ige, who's only 5'7". So he will have a huge size advantage in this. And his style, in many ways, Henry's style does remind me of, he's almost like a Scottish Nate Diaz, because he's got sort of like a similar body type, a similar style. He likes to walk his opponents down. Does tend to get hit a lot, but he's very tough, excellent cardio. He's got a good chin on him. He can eat a shot, no problem. And he just likes to walk his opponents down and use his size and his length to smother his opponents with pressure. And because he is so tall and long, his offensive wrestling isn't the best, because obviously he's so tall, he really struggles to shoot in deep on his opponents. So he will let the takedown come to him. He will pressure his opponent and pressure his opponent and pressure his opponent until they try to take him down. And that's where he'll work his ground game and look to put him in trouble. So I do prefer Ige in this fight. I do favour him. Like I say, he was one of the first names that jumped out at me. I thought Ige might have been a decent bet, but with a 60% implied probability, I would recommend passing on this fight, guys. And with an implied probability of 43%, I don't love Danny Henry either, because like I say, he is extremely hittable, and on the ground, Dan Ige is just a higher level than him. There's no doubt about it. It's just, I do worry about Ige giving up position at the wrong times. There's 2 minutes left to go in a round. Ige starts fishing for a submission. Henry gets a reversal, ends up on top and nicks the round. That could quite easily happen. And as we know, with home advantage on his side, judges, any little excuse to score the round for him, they're going to do it. So that is that fight out the way, guys. Next fight up is focusing on another fighter whose name was one of the first that jumped out at me, and it's Nathaniel Wood. Absolutely love Nathaniel Wood. He's amazing. Like, as a British MMA fan, Nathaniel Wood's got to be one of our best chances of, a legit UFC champion, over the next 5 or 6 years. He's only 25 years old. He's already amazing at everything. And when you think of how much he could improve over the next 5 years, he calls himself the prospect now, and he could really develop to become something special. Now, my only real issue with Nathaniel Wood, and his only real weakness, is that, it's kind of like a strength and a weakness, but Nathaniel Wood loves a scrap. He absolutely loves a scrap. And he does get sucked into reckless exchanges, and because of that, he does tend to take a lot of big shots, and he does tend to wear a lot of damage, which obviously isn't good under the new scoring, the new criteria the judges are supposed to be using, where they are supposed to take much more notice of damage in fights. It's not good, because Nathaniel Wood is always busted up. And if we look back at some of his recent fights, in his UFC debut against Johnny Eduardo, he was rocked and hurt bad in round 1. We also seen him go to war in Cage Warriors against Josh Reed. Reed almost finished him. Some referees would even have stopped that fight. So Nathaniel Wood is always a risk, which is a shame, because I really, really do like him in this fight. If it wasn't for the fact that he was so reckless, I think he would be a decent bet. But if we look at the odds, if we look at what the odds are telling us, the odds will always make our decision for us. And at the moment, you can see that, the best odds available on Nathaniel Wood at the moment, around about 1.38, giving him an implied probability of 72%, which means to find any value in Nathaniel Wood at all, you've got to give him at least a 75% chance or better of winning, which is a huge stretch when you take into consideration how reckless he is. Now Jose Quinones is not a particularly dangerous striker, as we can see on his record here. I am not a wiki capper. You know me. I always look at the past footage, the way both guys perform. But as you can see, Quinones doesn't have any wins, or he does have 1 win due to strikes on his record on Ultimate Fighter Latin America. But aside from that, he doesn't, although Davy Ramos is a very, very high... Surely that's not a Davy Ramos in the UFC. Wow, it is. So Quinones beat this guy. Well, there you go. That is reason enough not to bet on Nathaniel Wood with an implied probability of 72%, because Davy Ramos is absolutely legit. But I'm guessing that this fight must have been a knockout win for Quinones, because Davy Ramos is super high level on the ground. I very, very much doubt that Quinones would have been able to have submitted Ramos. Doesn't say what type of victory this was, or maybe won by decision. Who knows? But anyway, back on topic. Quinones isn't particularly dangerous, but when you're as reckless as Nathaniel Wood, it's always a possibility that you could eat a big shot. So there's no way that I can bet Nathaniel Wood as a big favourite. And there is another big question, about this fight, because from what I've seen, I believe that Nathaniel Wood should be a big favourite, because I think if the fight stays standing, Wood should be able to pick Quinones apart and have a really comfortable night. Quinones isn't the best striker, doesn't have too much power in his hands, stays very light on his feet, but not even particularly great defensively. I think Nathaniel Wood can take control of the centre of the octagon, walk Quinones down, and basically pick him apart, to be honest with you. My only fear is if Wood does get sucked into a reckless exchange and he were to get caught with something. But the real big fear in this fight, for me, is that we haven't really seen Nathaniel Wood go up against like a decent wrestler. We haven't. If you look at his record, Andre Ewell, not really that strong of a wrestler, even though he did cause Raynon Barão some problems. Johnny Eduardo's obviously a Muay Thai fighter. Josh Reed's a brawler. Vaughan Lee is a striker. So we haven't seen him fight too many high-level wrestlers. And even though when Jose Quinones started his career, he was a boxer, he was a striker, kickboxer, he has evolved his game now at Alliance MMA. Trains here, I believe he's dating Jessica Penney, who he met at Alliance MMA. But Quinones is technically a very good grappler. A very, very good grappler, in fact. He's got a long, lean frame, which means, when he's facing opponents like Nathaniel Wood, who's only 5'6", Quinones does a really good job of getting really deep into his opponents, getting a body lock secured around their body and throwing them to the ground. And he's also very heavy from top position. He's got long, skinny limbs that he can use to take his opponents back. And when Quinones gets top position, or he gets control of his opponent's back, he's very, very good at maintaining control and winning rounds. And he's also very intelligent. He understands the importance of winning rounds. So he tries to steal rounds with like takedowns and stuff. And because we haven't seen Nathaniel Wood defend that many deep takedown attempts from different types of grapplers, we don't know how Nathaniel Wood's going to deal with that. I hate to make this generalization, but he is only 25 years old. And, I'm from the UK, and UK fighters don't tend to have the best grappling base early on in their career. It takes them, many, many years to develop that, because many UK gyms are more focused on striking. So at 25 years old, even though, Nathaniel Wood does train at a great gym, under the tutelage of Brad Pickett, I'm not sure if his wrestling is going to be good enough, if his takedown defense is going to be good enough to shut Quinones down. Now, what I would say is that Quinones, like I say, is a legit grappler, so this is a very good test. It would be great to see this fight go the distance and see Nathaniel Wood stuff a load of different takedown attempts so we learn more about him. But at the moment, even though I do think he wins this because he's significantly better when it comes to striking, and from what I've seen in flashes, he looks very skilled on the ground. At the moment, it's too big of an assumption to assume that he can keep this fight standing and win this fight. But again, Nathaniel Wood is a big, popular British fighter. I love Nathaniel Wood. Everyone in the UK loves Nathaniel Wood. So he's going to have big home advantage on his side this weekend. Which could even help referees stand the fight up earlier than they should be if he gets taken down. But with an implied probability of, like I say, 72%, that is way too steep. There is no way that you can bet Nathaniel Wood at those odds. It's just not a good bet. But at the same time, looking at the odds on Quinones, currently around about an average of 3.20, giving him an implied probability of 31%. I don't feel comfortable betting him at these odds because, like I say, if Nathaniel Wood can keep this fight standing, I think he's going to pick Quinones apart and run through Quinones. And at the same time, Nathaniel Wood has shown flashes of being very strong on the ground and very skilled. So it's a real big assumption at the moment to assume he can keep this fight standing, but also based on what we've seen, there's a good chance he can. It's just at the moment at these odds, both guys are a gamble that I just don't want to take, and I'd recommend you pass on this fight. So next up, we go to the main event, which is Darren Till against Jorge Masvidal. So this fight is one of those fights where I really want to make it clear, like I talk about this a lot, but this is one of those fights where you have to remember that there are so many different ways that every fight can play out. This game of making money from betting on fights is not about being the smartest guy in the pub. It's not about knowing more than someone else or knowing better than someone else. It's not about knowing who's going to win, because it's impossible. Hear Robin Black talk about this a lot. Dan Hardy alludes to it in his Inside the Octagon breakdowns. This game is not about knowing who will win and predicting who will win. It's about identifying all possible ways that a fight can play out, trying to identify the most likely way a fight will play out, and then looking at the odds and see if it's worth betting on that fighter who will likely win if that scenario unfolds, and looking at if the risk is worth the reward. And I say that because this fight between Darren Till and Jorge Masvidal is very complex. There's no way that you can know who's going to win this. All you can do in this situation with this type of fight is identify all the ways that it could play out, and then look at the odds and make a decision based on all the information you've got available to you. You know, like I said earlier on, just this past weekend, we saw Tim Means knocked out for the first time in his 40-fight career against a guy that's not particularly dangerous standing. Compared to the main event, we had Junior Dos Santos against an absolute wrecking machine in Derek Lewis. And Lewis was inches away from connecting with JDS a few times, and yet JDS came out on top and won the fight. But if you would have bet on JDS to win that fight, were you right? Were you right? Is there such thing as being right? Or on another day, in another time, in another circumstance, could Derek Lewis, when feigning being hurt to the body, actually landed one of those right hook bombs that he threw, trying to catch JDS out and playing possum? It could happen. That's just an example. Lots of different pathways that it could play out. The Means Nico Price fight, Means was hurt early in the first round. Price could have got a finish then, or Means could have continued to dominate and win the entire fight and cruise to a win if he could have just avoided that right hand. So loads of different ways fights can play out, and it's important to have that mindset when we think about a fight like Till versus Masvidal. So where do I start with this one? This is a complicated fight. The first thing that I would say about this fight before we go into how they match up is that I do have some concerns over where Masvidal is at in his career at the moment. And I will play you this video from his Instagram just to try and illustrate what I mean a little bit more. So as you can see in this video, Masvidal's not looking great here. And by that, what I mean is, don't want to throw any shade, but he's obviously going bald. His hairline's receding here quite badly, you know, at quite a rapid rate. You know, if you go back and look at his hairlines from when he fought Stephen Thompson in his last fight, you'll see that it wasn't looking quite as bad as this. His hair's also thinning, and he has also made jokes on his Instagram page that he's been dyeing his hair. Now that's significant, because when a man's hair and his hairline changes like this, it is a sign that their testosterone levels are starting to decrease. The level of testosterone in their body is starting to decrease. And that would make sense, because if we look at Jorge Masvidal, he's now 34 years old. And we know that when, on average, when a male adult reaches the age of 33 years old, their body starts to produce significantly less amounts of testosterone every year after the age of 33 years old. So Masvidal is past his physical prime here. So we can expect him from this stage in his career to now decline. Happens to everyone, you know, past the age of 33. For most athletes, they decline in any sport, not just MMA. And if we look at Masvidal's record, you know, he's 32-13 He's had over 40 pro fights. He was also well known as a street fighter in Miami before becoming a pro MMA fighter. So God knows how many actual fights he's had. And he also trains for the majority of his career at American Top Team, which is one of the best gyms in the world. So God knows how many gym wars he's been in. So if you think about Masvidal being 34 years old, this is a different kind of 34 years old. This is a very, very old 34 years old. This isn't a 34-year-old fighter that's had, 15 fights. This is a 34-year-old fighter who has got a lot of miles on the clock. And ultimately, Father Time catches up with everyone. And in Masvidal's last fight, we can close that down now, but in Masvidal's last fight against Stephen Thompson, he did show up at the weigh-ins looking out of shape, looking like, he hadn't really trained for that fight. And that's a big deal because where he showed up looking so soft and visually out of shape, I knew some guys that bet on Masvidal to beat Thompson, and when they saw him weigh in, they were really pissed off because it was clear he was not in shape and he didn't train properly for that fight. And we know that one of the reasons why fighters tend to decline past the age of 33 when their testosterone levels start to dip is because testosterone, that fire inside a man, that aggression, is what makes them get up every day and go to work and go to training and train hard in the gym to be one of the best fighters in the world. That's why the majority of PEDs, what the majority of PEDs do, performance enhancing drugs, is they boost your testosterone levels. So it's no surprise that when a fighter's testosterone levels start to dip, they start to turn up for weigh-ins like Masvidal did against Stephen Thompson, where it's clear he didn't train for that fight as hard as he had for some other fights throughout his career. But having said that, if you're not going to get motivated and up for competing in a 5-round main event in London against a popular British fighter, what is going to motivate you? So I just wanted to cover that. Before we go into how these guys match up from a technical point of view, I need to make it clear that I do have concerns that Masvidal might be on a steep decline. Like I say, that Instagram video, his age, the number of fights he's had, and also the way he looked in the Thompson fight are all red flags. But prior to the Thompson fight, he looked excellent. Prior to the Thompson fight, I believe we were seeing, some of Masvidal's best performances of his career against Maia, Cerrone, and Ellenberger. What I would also say is we haven't seen Jorge Masvidal fight for well over a year now, coming up to almost 18 months, which is obviously another concern, ring rust being a very real issue. But having talked a lot about, Masvidal's physical issues, which may impair his performance, Darren Till has his own issues. Darren Till is not without his own physical issues. Obviously, he's at 19 pro fights, which I was going to say only 19 pro fights, but for a 26-year-old, that is a lot of professional MMA fights. He's also had upwards of 50 Muay Thai fights. And you can tell because Darren Till, the way he fights, he's excellent. Definitely looks way older and way more mature in the way he performs, the way he carries himself, his skill set than a 26-year-old. He's only a year older than Nathaniel Wood. And when you go and watch Nathaniel Wood, he's reckless, he's raw, he's aggressive, he's got all this energy. But, all that energy, eventually he's going to reach a level and it's going to get him into trouble. Whereas Darren Till is very, very tactical, very intelligent, just brilliant. The total package, just an excellent fighter. And when you see that Darren Till is only 26 years old, it's kind of hard to believe. He fights like someone in his prime in their early 30s or late 20s, much, much better. So it's impressive. But there are some areas where Darren Till does have limitations aside from skills, which could get him into trouble in this fight. Obviously, his weight cut to 170 pounds is absolutely brutal. He doesn't hide this. He gets asked about it in every interview. And that will have a massive impact on his body. That'll test his cardio, his strength, his explosiveness, and also his brain health. Now, we've seen Darren Till, eat some big shots in his past fights. He was involved in an absolute war against Nicholas Dalby. And he ate some shots against Ayari and Velakovic as well. And, his chin looked great. But even though there's no shame in being dropped in his last fight by Tyron Woodley, we have to remember that Till hasn't fought a very high level of opponent. Stephen Thompson did a great job of avoiding eating any big shots, but he did get dropped by Woodley, and even though any human alive would get dropped by Woodley, the point I'm trying to make is, with Darren Till having such a big weight cut, being dropped in his last fight, he also took a ton of damage on the ground from Woodley's ground and pound. And aside from Woodley and Thompson, you know, the Donald Cerrone fight wasn't even really a starter. Till just ran through him. You know, we haven't really seen Till fight that many dangerous strikers, guys like Masvidal, who we know will land on him. And with a guy like Till having such a big weight cut, we know that the chin is massively affected by dehydration and a bad weight cut. You know, when these boxers have these horrendous injuries, these brain aneurysms, you know, these issues where boxers almost die in the ring, a lot of the time is not attributed to the damage they take in the fight. It's attributed to the dehydration from the weight cut, which meant that their brain just couldn't handle the damage like they'd usually be able to. So that's significant for me in this fight, because we know that Jorge Masvidal has got a legendary chin. You know, essentially he's a lightweight fighting at welterweight, whereas, like John Gooden said, with Darren Till, we've got a middleweight fighting at welterweight. So they come in two separate ways. But because of that, Masvidal's chin is legendary. You know, he's had over 40 pro fights. And I scanned back through his record, and he's only been finished once by strikes. In his last, once due to strikes in his over 40 pro fights against Rodrigo Dam back in 2008, when he admitted back then he used to live on a diet at McDonald's. So who knows what his camp was like for this. You know, just very, very impressive when you take into consideration the fact that Masvidal has been competing against the best fighters in the world for more than 10 years. Heavy hitters. He's gone the distance with Stephen Thompson, Donald Cerrone, Ellenberger hits hard, Pearson, Larkin, Cesar Ferrara, Alaya Quinta, Darren Cruikshank, you know, Tim Means, Gilbert Melendez, KJ Noons, went the distance with Paul Daly. Luis Palomino always swings for the fences. So all these guys, he hasn't been finished due to strikes against. We know his chin is absolutely legit, which is significant in this fight because he's not going away. Darren Till, in his past fights in the UFC, we saw him run through Donald Cerrone, you know, put Stephen Thompson into a defensive shell for most of that fight, and Jason Ayari and Velikovic were also in a defensive shell very early on in those fights. They were scared to engage with him. And that's significant because Masvidal will land on him. He will stand right in front of Till and trade shots. And like I say, that big weight cut, how's Till's chin going to hold up? We have no idea. But moving on a little bit from that, obviously I'm not questioning Till's chin, I'm just saying it's something to think about. We also know that Darren Till has got a brutal weight cut. And I do think his cardio is a little bit suspect. If you go back and watch his fights against Dalby, Ayari and Velikovic, you will see that Darren Till did slow down quite badly in round 2 of those fights. And by the 3rd round, he was pretty tired in all of those fights, especially the Dalby fight. He was absolutely gassed and wrecked. Now, I've no doubt his cardio has improved a little bit, or quite a lot since then, but this is a 25-minute fight. And if Masvidal comes out aggressive, starts very fast, forces Till to work very hard in the 1st and 2nd round, you know, could quite easily see a scenario like we did recently in the Woodley and Usman fight, where Till just doesn't have the cardio to keep up with Masvidal for 25 minutes, and we start to see Masvidal take over late. Because we absolutely know Masvidal's chin is legendary. I would be very surprised if Till came out and ran through Masvidal like he ran through Cerrone. It's just not going to happen. So chances are this fight is going to go, you know, into the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. And does Till have the cardio to keep up with him? Because realistically, the fights we've seen Darren Till go the distance in so far against Dalby, Ayari and Velikovic, he got tired in those 3 fights. There's no doubt about it. Go back and watch him. His cardio looked great in the Stephen Thompson fight. But what you have to remember about that fight is that Stephen Thompson allowed Darren Till to dictate the pace. He allowed Darren Till to control the centre of the octagon. Darren Till could choose when to let his hands go, when to put his foot on the accelerator, when to ease off, when to pressure Thompson, when to ease off. And that allowed Till to pace himself for 25 minutes. He won't be given that luxury against Masvidal. Thompson is a counter striker. He's happy to give up that dynamic. But Masvidal will be in Till's face. walking him down, exchanging shots with him in boxing range. He won't back down, and that will force Till to work harder. That will push his cardio further than anyone has been able to push Till's cardio in the past. You know, there are also signs to me in Till's last 2 fights against Thompson and Woodley that he knows his own limitations. Till knows that he probably hasn't got the gas tank to fight at a high pace for 25 minutes. This is why we saw him pace himself so well against Stephen Thompson. Did an excellent job of pacing himself against Thompson. But this could also be the reason why, you know, Till has been criticised for not landing a single strike against Tyron Woodley in this fight. And was that because he was holding back and trying to pace himself because he knew he'd had a brutal weight cut, he'd gassed out in the past against Dalby Ayari and Velikovic, and he was trying to pace himself? So if Masvidal does come out and start pushing him really hard from the first minute, what's that going to do to Till psychologically? How's he going to pace himself? Is his cardio going to hold up? We know Masvidal's got great cardio. Even when he showed up for his last fight against Stephen Thompson, looking like he trained at McDonald's, he still fought at a high pace for 15 minutes. You know, he was still chasing after Thompson in the 3rd round. So I trust Masvidal's cardio and his chin a hell of a lot more than I trust Darren Till's. So that's something to think about. Now, what I would also talk about this fight when it comes to technique is Darren Till's amazing. He absolutely is amazing. There's no getting away with it. Absolutely brilliant. But what Till does is very, very good at deterring his opponents from coming forward with his left hand, which means he is able to pace himself, because what you'll see him do is he will keep pressuring his opponent to the point where they need to do something to try and get some space or get some respect for him and back him up. So he'll pressure, then they will come forward and throw a punch or a kick, and you'll just see him move back outside of their range. He'll have the left hand cocked and he'll look to counter them. Doesn't always throw it, but every time they come forward, he's always range finding. He's always trying to find his range till eventually he can lean back and cock the left hand. He's always light on his feet, always like a spring, in, out, in, out, in, out. And that's significant in this fight, because what you see from pretty much all the guys that Darren Till has fought so far in his career is he has successfully put them into a defensive shell. What you've seen is when Till has come forward debating them into attacking, when they've attacked, he's leant back, caught them with a big left hand counter or a big leg kick or something, and then that's put them in a defensive shell, which has made them reluctant to come forward in future, or it's made them reluctant to follow up with, you know, a 3-4 punch combo. What you've tended to see him do is as they come forward, he catches them with a combo, and then they kind of like retreat. They don't follow up, they don't pressure. Masvidal's very different. Masvidal has excellent striking defense. He's got a really good chin. He loves to box. When Masvidal plays, when Till tries to do that, Masvidal's not always going to walk through it and pressure him, but there will come a point where Masvidal will not play that game. You will not put Masvidal into a defensive shell. It will come a point in a fight where he'll think, fuck it, and he'll just start walking you down and pressuring you. And Darren Till has the cardio and the technique and the skill to keep control of the centre of the octagon and put his opponents into a defensive shell by keeping their left hand cocked and doing a really good job of controlling the distance by bouncing in and out of his opponent's range and pressuring him and forcing him to come forward and attack. But he's very good at that when he can dictate the pace. He's very good at that when he only has to, you know, probe them and counter them once or twice a minute. How would he do? How effective would his style be? And how would his cardio hold up against someone like Masvidal, who've perhaps got the head movement to avoid the big counters and the boxing, footwork and chin to just work their way inside and keep coming forward? Because when you force Till to fight on the back foot, I'm not convinced he's going to be able to fight on the outside and fight backwards very effectively. Like I say, he is kind of, if you go back and watch the footage of his past fights, you'll see what I mean. But I'm not going to call him a single shot fighter. I'm going to call him a single attack fighter, because when someone comes forward, like I say, he looks to counter them, but he's not a fighter like a Stephen Thompson that is experienced at fighting backwards on the fight book. It's a very different skill to fight moving backwards. It's very difficult, very, very difficult. And even though Till's an excellent counter striker, his Muay Thai style means he needs to be on the front foot to counter effectively. I'm not convinced he's going to be as effective moving backwards, and we know Masvidal's got the toughness, the chin, the heart, the cardio to force him to fight backwards, which is why this is such a fucking interesting and complex stylistic matchup. I love it. I can't wait to see what happens. And Till could prove me wrong, and he could absolutely do an amazing job of fighting backwards and pick Masvidal off and completely counter-strike him effectively, except the way he slowed down against Yari Velikovic and also Dalby makes me think he might struggle, because you use up a hell of a lot more energy when you haven't been forced to fight backwards and forced to counter-strike than you use when you're controlling everything, dictating the pace, walking your opponent down. It's very interesting. It's something to think about. So, talked about most of the stuff that I want to talk about. You know, both guys, what I would say about both guys is they're both excellent defensively. Darren Till does an excellent job of fighting long, and even though he keeps his hands low, he's just brilliant at slipping punches and just staying just outside of his opponent's range. Does an excellent job, and it doesn't take Till that long to find his range either, does it? Very early on in the fight, he's excellent. And Masvidal, a completely different style of striking defense. Even though he tends to get hit a lot more than Till, Masvidal's such a comfortable striker after having over 40 pro fights that he's got a really traditional boxing style. You know, rolls with the punches, lots of head movement. Just both guys, brilliant striking defense. And one thing that I will also say that's interesting about this fight is that Darren Till is a big guy. For the welterweight division, he's 6 foot tall, so he will be taller than Masvidal. But one thing that's interesting about this matchup is that the stats on Tapology are actually wrong. But both these guys have actually got the same reach. They've both got a 75-inch reach. So even though Till may have a slight size advantage, when it comes to striking, it shouldn't matter that much, which is kind of interesting. Till's used to being able to fight longer and having to reach over a lot of the guys that he fights, but in this fight he won't. So that is something else to think about. So, let's just skim through, make sure I've covered everything. Right. Okay. I have covered everything. It's time to talk about this fight from a betting perspective. And to do that, we need to look at the odds. So, I've covered everything I want to say. I guess the only thing left to say, possibly, before we look at the odds is the different ways that it could play out. I think there's lots of ways it could play out. I can see both guys winning this. I think there's a possibility that Father Time has caught up with Jorge Masvidal, and Darren Till, the young, hungry gorilla, 26 years old, just picks him apart. I don't think Till's going to get an early finish because of how tough Masvidal is, but I could see, you know, Masvidal really struggling with the size and the way that Till's so fast. And I could just see Masvidal struggling to find his range and just getting picked apart by Till. And Masvidal, like I said, whereas I think the best version of Masvidal we've ever seen can keep coming forward and pressure Till, I also think that if Father Time has caught up with Masvidal, you know, he's been out for 18 months, ring rest, he's 34 years old, showing signs of him being on the decline. I could also see him just not having the aggression, the cardio, the spirit anymore to do that, to walk through the fire, to go through hell, to keep pressuring Till, to keep eating, you know, big counter shots and keep coming forward. I could see that. So I could see a scenario where Till picks him apart. I could also see a situation where both guys are, you know, conscious of the fact that this is a big main event. 25 minutes is a long time. Masvidal hasn't fought in a while. He's potentially on a bit of a decline. You know, Darren Till knows that he had a tough weight cut. He knows he's gassed out in a few of his past fights. So I could see both guys starting quite slow, taking a while to find their range. We could have a feel out process of a couple of rounds, so that neither guy wants to risk gassing out too early on in a fight and getting humiliated, and it being quite a close back and forth match. I could also see that. But at the same time, I could also see the scenario that I've been talking quite a lot in this video unfold, where You know, Masvidal comes out knowing that Till's cardio is questionable, knowing he may have had a tough weight cut, and Masvidal taking it to him from the very first minute, forcing Till to exchange, walking him down, initiating reckless exchanges to try and drag Till into deeper water to test his cardio to potentially get a late finish or a decision win. I can see all these possibilities playing out. So if we look at the odds, the current average odds available on Darren Till are around about 1.41, giving Darren Till an implied probability of 71%. And this is definitely one of those situations, you know, I've mentioned it many times in the past, where we know that that MMA is quite a unique sport in that popularity and hype does weigh into the odds. It absolutely does. It's a little bit like WWE in that respect. And there's no doubt that Darren Till is a super hyped fighter, and rightly so. He's a brilliant fighter. He's excellent. But to give him better than a 71% chance of winning this fight is a little bit crazy. I think these odds are, you know, roughly where they should be, I guess. Maybe a little bit steep. But to get any value on betting Darren Till, you would have to give him a 75% chance or better of winning, which is absolutely mental when you take into consideration the fact that a weight cut can have a big impact on your ability to take a punch. It can destroy your cardio. And Masvidal is absolutely fucking legit. So there's no way you can bet on Darren Till with an implied probability of 71%. Till is a very bad bet. I've no doubt the odds are what they are because the UK is a big gambling nation. There's a load of hype behind Darren Till. I'm sure betting sites like Bet365, Paddy Power, they'll be running all kinds of promotions this weekend encouraging you to bet on Darren Till. But for me, Till is a bad bet. I just do not think he deserves an implied probability of 71%. I hope he wins. He's one of my favourite fighters. I love to see British fighters do well. Almost said English then, but I'm Welsh, so I can't play that game. Always, you know, claim English and Scottish fighters as our own, so I call them British. But 71% implied probability, not interested. So that begs the question, is Jorge Masvidal worth a bet? So if we look at his average odds at the moment, call it an average of around about 3.0. Giving him an implied probability of 33%. Now, with this, we have to remember that he does have a lot of challenges to overcome. He has been out for 18 months. You know, you look at that video on his Instagram and the way he showed up at weigh-ins for the Stephen Thompson fight. There are signs Father Time's caught up with him. You know, is he only turning up and taking this fight for a big payday? And, you know, like I say, home advantage is a big thing. The crowd's going to be a big time behind Darren Till. Every time Till lands something big, the crowd's going to go crazy. So if this did end up being, you know, a close fight where there's a lot of feeling out process at the beginning, and it's like a close kickboxing match, a tactical chess match that goes the distance, you know, Till Masvidal's really going to have to have done something special to get the nod from the judges, you know, and also Till's absolutely legit, hits very hard, very technical, very dangerous, skilled in all areas, fights long. Till is the real deal, there's no doubt about it. So Masvidal is a risk if you bet on him. He absolutely is. There's a lot of challenges to overcome. But I do think that there could be value here. I really do. At the moment on this fight, I think the odds are roughly where they should be. All things considered, I do think Till deserves an implied probability, you know, around about a 70% chance of winning this fight. And I think Masvidal, all things considered, has got around a 33% chance of winning this fight. So for me, at the moment, the way this stands, there's no bet for me. But before you click close and you go watch another video or you unsubscribe or hit the dislike button, this fight could develop into this could develop into a bet, because as we know, Darren Till is a very popular fighter, loads of hype behind him. And I expect a lot of money to come in on him between now and Saturday. I expect people to bet him at these odds. And like I say, UK bookies are bound to offer promotions to bet him and incentives to bet him. Also, people are just going to bang him into accumulators and parlays because they're going to be watching the fights on Saturday and they want to root for him and they just want to make the fights more interesting. So I do think we could see these odds come down to around 1.36, maybe 1.33 at a stretch, which would obviously mean that odds on Masvidal would improve. And the way I'm personally going to play this, guys, I am considering a bet on Masvidal. I've got to be honest with you. I absolutely am. But the way I'm going to play this is I'm going to wait until weigh-in day. because I want to see how Masvidal looks at weigh-ins. You know, if he comes into weigh-ins, you know, looking like he trained at McDonald's with a dad bod, you know, his stomach looks swollen, and he looked quite flabby when he weighed in against Stephen Thompson. Jump on YouTube and go check it out. If he turns up looking like that, Darren Till's probably a good bet, because Masvidal looked out of shape and flat and slow against Stephen Thompson. But if Masvidal shows up in good shape, you know, six-pack, looking healthy, you know, looking vibrant, then, you know, I would consider him at these odds, because, you know, like I say, Till's cardio is definitely suspect. There's no doubt about it. And Masvidal, if he comes out hard, aggressive in round one, pushes the pace, makes Till work early, I think this fight could get very, very interesting from the third round onwards. Because imagine if Till were to slow down around about the third round like he did against Dalby, Velikovich and Ayari, you know, having to be in the octagon for 10 to 15 minutes against a guy like Masvidal, with Masvidal walking you down, you know, unloading 4 or 5 punch combos, go into the body, go into the legs. It's an absolute fucking nightmare. So as a decent sized underdog, Masvidal could be worth a bet, but I just want to see how he looks at the weigh-ins, guys. And that is really it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be back tomorrow with part 2 in this video, where I'll be ticking off another 3 fights. And don't forget, guys, if you do want me to do that bonus live stream video that I've got scheduled in here for 1 PM British time this Saturday, where I'll be answering all your questions, all your specific betting questions you might have. We can talk more about the Masvidal-Till fight and talk about whether Masvidal's worth a bet based on how he looked at the weigh-ins. And I'll also find a prop bet for every single fight for this card. So if you want that video, hit the thumbs up button, and if every video I put out this week gets 50 likes, I'll do that live stream. Also, please, to reach that target, share this video on all your forums that you post on social media, all that kind of good stuff. It would help me out a lot. I really appreciate it, guys. Again, I'm sorry if you bet on Tim Means last week. We just have to take that one on the chin, literally. You know, it's just one of those things. Shit happens, losses happen, everyone wins and loses. That's the way it goes. That's why they call it gambling. But hopefully we can get back on track this weekend with a profit. Take care. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow.